Welcome to the Deskbound Therapy Podcast, hosted by David London. David is a posture and mobility expert, yoga teacher, and certified online trainer. This podcast is about empowering desk-bound professionals, how to live their healthiest life, and move pain-free. Now, let's dive into this episode.
Love says, I am everything. Wisdom says, I am nothing. Between the two, my life flows.
That's a great quote, and super excited to have you here today, Brandon. Welcome to episode 38 of the Deskbound Therapy Podcast, the first episode of season 2. Really excited to chat with you. I've been following your work with exercise therapy, for the past 3 or 4 years, and a lot of my colleagues have taken your course. And I just took your squat masterclass, which was a great refresher in corrective exercise and fixing the squat. So would love to just, hear a bit more about, your background before we dive into this episode. Sure.
I was initially, I didn't intend to end up in this field of work. I think as many people didn't, I initially had aspirations of being a doctor or something along those lines, but it didn't work out. And I ended up working as a fitness trainer after graduating kinesiology just to take a year off and kind of get myself collected. And I decided to just take every course I could. So I was traveling all over North America. I was taking public buses. Like I remember one time taking a trip to Minnesota and it was in the dark and some baby was crying. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like I should just take the local courses like everybody else. But my thoughts were that if I'm going to go into the realm of fitness and exercise, that I'm going to go full out and spend all the money I can, put myself in as much debt as I can. I got the rest of my life to pay it back and just get as much wisdom. I thought wisdom is your best investment. So I thought nothing will do marketing for you like having the answers to problems. And so I thought that would be my approach instead of, slick marketing and business tactics and sales tactics. I would just let the work speak for itself and just learn whatever necessary to get as good as I could. So I started off working for a gym called Extreme Fitness for 4 years. Then I ended up transitioning to the Medcan Clinic downtown Toronto. And I worked there for 14 years as the head trainer and helped to build and mentor a team of, at one point, I believe we had 48 trainers doing about 250 sessions a day. So a lot of my time was spent there as a last stop shop for people that had aches or pains. If they had seen, physios, chiros, and various types of specialists and it just been ongoing, I was kind of the person they would see that would assess everything head to toe and try to determine a root cause that everybody else had overlooked. For example, somebody might have really recurring knee pain, but maybe it was actually a hip imbalance nobody had addressed, or maybe a shoulder pain was actually from a twisted hip or something like that. So I would look at the whole body, break it down, and then give hands-off solutions. So exercises and stretches that the client can do on their own to kind of get to the bottom of these ongoing aches and pains. And in that time, I've done now over 30,000 hours one-on-one coaching clients, and I stopped counting with certifications I've done or books I've read. The whole time I did it very mindfully. So I was making client case studies and I was writing everything down because my primary philosophy has been truth through experience. So nothing's going to teach you as much as your clients. No university can teach you as much as your clients, no college. So I wanted to learn as much as I could from trial and error with clients, seeing what works best. So every time I took a course, I would try out everything they say and see how it works in the real world. And sometimes I found there wasn't a really practical way to apply what I'd learned. Sometimes it was just a whole bunch of theoretical salad in some of the courses I was taking. And then sometimes it was a one size fits all was what I was taught. And so it was all over the map in terms of the education we get. I think that's the journey we're all on. You can get powerful education and you can get weak education sources. And so I became very discerning in terms of how I would learn. And during my journey, I ended up being fortunate enough to be a national TV health expert was one of the experiences I had. I got to work with Olympic and pro athletes and do a lot of segments on TV and stuff like that. And then I have more recently, as of about 5 years ago, I transitioned into teaching everything I do. So I had to innovate a system and kind of figure it out and put all the pieces together with something that works in the real world and something that's very linear and kind of tells you exactly what to do for your assessment findings. And I was asked to teach others how to do what I do. And that's how I spend my time now at Exercise Therapy, is coaching people on these systems that have helped me achieve success at the highest level with gold medal Olympic athletes. And these systems have helped me develop a reputation to be like the go-to expert, the last stop shop for getting people out of aches and pains. And now I go around teaching and passing that on to others so that they don't have to do it the long and hard way like I did in the trenches, figuring it out. So for anyone who's listening, by the way, I would say, if we haven't met yet, please find us on Instagram, Exercise Therapy Association, Facebook. We got an exercise therapy group, an exercise therapy page, just so we can stay connected, because one of the things is I'm here to just give and share for everybody. I've been on the journey you're all on, and I look at everybody as like a younger brother or younger sister. And I want people to I want to share the success I've had. And I know how frustrating it can be, like not having answers to client questions or aches and pains that are coming back. So I've been there. If you feel like disappointed, that you feel like you're letting clients down because they're just not getting the results you hope for, their aches and pains are coming back, and you feel confused, I don't think it's your fault. I just think we haven't been given the tools to succeed in this industry.
Yeah, man, you've got such a great background. And I'm curious if there's any, if you've had any personal injuries that have really ignited your passion to, to help others find the root cause. Cause I'm really all about with my clients too, is looking at the body as a global approach is something I'm also super, passionate about. Having, like you said, I've had a shoulder injury where no one, looked at my neck, for example, or I had like a hip injury where no one, was looking at, at my ankle and stuff like that. So it's really great that, you're promoting this, and it's something that, more and more people are starting to do. Cause I find, if you go to see, for example, when I was a trainer, I had some clients who, were getting injured, and I was frustrated. Well, they got injured, on their own. And I had trouble really, figuring out what the issue was. And, that's part of the reason why I went to physiotherapy school was I want to, I still want to be a trainer, but I wanted to have those tools so, I could assess and diagnose while also helping people on their fitness goals. And it's cool how you've kind of put it, together into your own system, and you can tell just the way you speak of it. This is, your lifelong passion. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. Awesome. Love hearing your story, man. So please feel free to share everything you can so I can understand you more. For me, really what set it off was I had a major shoulder injury that I suffered in football, and I used to compete as a super heavyweight kickboxer. And at the time I was undefeated. I was supposed to go and fight in New York, and I suffered this major shoulder injury, and I could just never recover from it. I went to see what I was told were the top therapists, the people who work with the top pros. And what I realized now looking back is they were just kind of messing around with me. They were sticking needles in my ears. They were giving me tubing exercises. It just seemed like there wasn't a logical process for them to figure out what to do. And there was no way that they were checking to make sure that they were making my shoulder better. And they weren't really, they were just keeping me busy. Like I was showing up for appointments and I was busy. And so I kind of felt a little bit disappointed in the system. I'm like, I got a shoulder problem and nobody can figure this thing out. And it has literally put my life on hold in many ways. Like it's put my athletic career on hold. And so I thought, somebody has to do something, and it's really pathetic. It has to be me. Like, I just got to figure this thing out on my own. Right. And so I did. And then I'd see other people with the same problem. I'd be like, okay, I've seen this before. I know this. And then I started to apply that process, trial and error, and researched everything else. The most recent injury I had would have been about 4 or 5 years ago. I tore a meniscus. I was playing volleyball, and one of my buddies landed on my knee. We did a jump at the net, and I landed on a bent knee, and he landed on top of it, and it just twisted, and my knee swelled up. And I went to physio, and they're like, yeah, torn meniscus. And then I was like, this is amazing, because we have our knee programming specialist course, and I've got all my own knee meniscus protocols. So I did them every day. Like I was able to use my own recipes I've used with clients. And then in 2 weeks, I went back to physio and I was pain-free and I had all my mobility back. And the physio was like, what did you do? Like, I've never seen anybody recover this quickly from a torn meniscus. And then I was like, I followed the stuff that I've given to other people. Like I was actually able to follow the exercise therapy system, right? So I haven't had an acre of pain since then. That was about 4 or 5 years ago. But when something does come up in my life, I'm always like super grateful, because I know that in real time, from a first person perspective, I can test things out and turn my life into a laboratory with experimentation on the truth of what works best. And so I love it. So if I get an ache or a pain or an injury, I'm like, yes, now I get to test out things and compare methods and see what's going to actually yield the best results here.
Yeah, and it's a really powerful tool to have, to be able to, troubleshoot your own body before, you go and help someone else. Because when I, just kind of backtrack a little bit in my story, I was, in the best shape of my life. Like I was doing gymnastics. I was able to do, 10 muscle-ups in a row. And, I was also, just getting into powerlifting. And I found I really had my first injury, when I felt like I was the strongest I ever was. I was, I won a bench press competition. I benched like 2 plates, 130 pounds. And, and then, just a few days afterwards, I had a shoulder injury. And it was really weird, because it was like, why am I getting this random shoulder injury right when I'm in the best shape of my entire life? I never felt so strong. I was making the best gains. And this was just about, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And I just, I went to a ton of therapists, and, I went to a sports therapist in Toronto, similar to you. And it was weird. He's just like, you're smart, you know how to exercise. I'll just do this hands-on stuff. And, you'll just, you'll figure it out, and then, I'd come back each week, I tried to figure it out, dude, but my shoulder still hurts. So it seems like, I was frustrated because no one really gave me the root cause, why I kept having these, recurrent shoulder things. And it really held back my training. And I like how, that's kind of how you have this approach now. And really, it's a really powerful tool that, I want everyone to have is, if you have, an issue, to be able to troubleshoot and learn about your body is really, the way we're supposed to interpret pain. Pain is just a warning sign, and doesn't necessarily mean we're in physical damage to the body. So it's cool that, you're using that information, how I feel it's supposed to be used. Like, for example, like yesterday when I was doing, some dips on the rings, something felt off. And then I did a few exercises in between sets, I was able to figure out, what works and doesn't work for my body. And I think even just for, the average person who does work out, it's helpful to be able to really understand, the movements and the exercises you're doing. So, long term, you can, we can empower ourselves to take care of our bodies.
Absolutely. And that's the major shift I would encourage everybody to go on, is from being in a disempowered state where other people are kind of telling you what should and shouldn't be done without verifying or proving it's the right thing, to going to an empowered state where you have your eyes of wisdom and you can tell something's going to work. And usually the big differentiator I find, if you're going to see somebody, is, do they use a feedback loop immediately to be able to determine if what they're going to give you is going to help you or hurt you? Or do they just take the shotgun approach and it's like ready, fire, then aim, and they just throw some solution at you? And I find that the best people, when I was kind of looking at the most successful pain experts around the world, they all test things out in real time. They test their assumptions. They use feedback loops. Most of them are using like hands-on muscle testing. Then they'd press here, press there, shift the posture, and see what gets things to work the way they should, to verify the approach before they commit to the approach. Many people out there are going to want you to commit to the approach without verifying it's going to do anything to help you. And that's the big difference. And you might have noticed that even with some of the people that that you've talked about, some of the people that you think are smartest, you might notice that those people are likely the ones that always verify things in advance to make sure that they're not deceiving themselves into thinking they know what's going on, or deceiving the client, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like I've been there too, the physios and therapists who you haven't really even tested my strength. Like I think, after, the shoulder injury, I went to, 3 or 4 different physios. And then I went to a chiro who did some cool kind of ART where she did like a release test of the strength, kind of moved it around. And I found that was really cool, kind of
Yeah.
figure out what muscles are activating versus inhibiting. And it brings me to, an interesting question is, like I personally am very a strong advocate for having good posture as that foundation for good movement. So I'm curious, where you stand on that because you mentioned, positioning the body in the right position and testing those things. Whereas a lot of people, I feel, bash on posture, like especially, the science world. Whereas I feel, people should really, think about it as, just like moving your body right and moving it well and really being solid in, functional movement patterns. Because when I'm, helping my clients and their goal is to, improve their posture, the first thing I look at is, the squat, the hip hinge, stuff like that, functional movement patterns. And I try to address posture by correcting those things first. And then, that's the way it's going to, be more functional to their everyday life.
Yeah. So I think I think posture is one of the most underrated things when it comes to fitness and exercise. And to begin, I would define what posture means to us, because really it's the position from which movement begins. And so if you're not in an advantageous position to begin movement, then you're going to have potential compromise to your mobility, to your strength, to your speed, everything. You're putting yourself at a disadvantage, no matter what your goal is. You should always figure out the optimal position to be in prior to movement. Now, sometimes that's just a static posture, or sometimes it's just a posture we get in before an exercise. But if you don't have a high standard on that, then it's like not having a high standard on a foundation before building skyscrapers. Like, sure, you might get lucky, it might work, but it's just by chance. If you don't lay a good foundation before building, then chances are you're going to have problems. And this is something where I think people have just really lowered their standards. They just assume that aches and pains come out of nowhere. That is not the case. There's always a reason. A lot of times it was unchecked posture issues. And there was something going on in somebody's posture and people were not checking for it. And a common example, just as an example that comes to mind, people who get shoulder issues. Like I saw somebody recently, they were getting recurring shoulder issues. And they had a really steep step at the bottom of their neck. So it was more like there was a derangement in their lower neck posture. And what happens is all the nerves for the shoulders are coming out of that area. So it's like pinching the wiring. So the muscles weren't firing properly. We had to do a bunch of different neck posture stuff. And then all of a sudden their shoulder mobility has improved tremendously and their strength, and they were able to lift without aches and pains. But if you don't, you have to find it to fix it. And if you're not looking at all of these aspects of the posture, then you're just playing guessing games.
Yeah, because really the posture in is going to be a pattern of how you approach any movement. Like if you sit at the desk all day and you have rounded shoulders, then you're probably going to round your shoulders on the bench press. You're going to, be in a slouch posture while you're doing rows and other things. And I really like how you state in such an elegant way. Like it is, posture is, how you start any movement. And that's really a good way to look at it instead of everyone coming at it as such, a negative view of, your best posture, your next posture is your best one. And, why don't you make your current one optimal and then your next one optimal instead of, just, staying slouched all day and just saying that it's fine just because you can straighten up. Like, I feel, people should, have more integrity for their posture because it's just, how you treat anything else.
Yeah. And I think there's ways to make it easier. So if you're a desk-bound athlete, right, then we know that there's a tendency to slump forward. There's a tendency to have a rounding of the upper spine, your shoulders curled forward, head forward posture, tightened hip flexors. This kind of comes with the territory. And just because you can straighten up on command doesn't mean you will. Most people, they're just like, oh, just stand with your shoulders up and back. Like that's just almost like painting over dirt. If you do posture training, it sticks you in those positions so that you're in that position without thinking about it. Because otherwise, assuming good posture has to be a 2-4-7 priority. And people just don't have that kind of mental reserve. Everyone's just saying, oh, it's not a big deal. You don't need to do posture training. Just, put your shoulders up and back like this. It's like, no. You need to stretch out the tight muscles on the front. You need to tighten up the loose muscles on the back to stick yourself in posture, and then reinforce it until that is your set point for posture. So you're literally sticking somebody in that position rather than telling them to constantly correct it.
Yeah, it should be easy and it should be effortless. It's like setting yourself up for success, just by, setting that foundation, of good posture. It's going to help you in all your athletic endeavors for sure. And I feel like, I give a lot of my clients, stretches and exercises they can do at the desk, stay mobile. And, my goal is to, help them get to the point where, they have the body awareness to, sense when they're slouching versus, just being like 30 minutes later and like, yo, I better get up, but I'm a little stiff here. Cause it should be, I find too, like the environment plays a huge role. Like if you have, incorrect, monitor height or even just a bad chair, it can really throw off your effort. So it's really important to address, both the internal and external factors of, different variables that can throw off your posture and your movement. Like I was in my, lab earlier today, the physio lab at my school, and the chairs are so weird. Like they got like a curved back, so you have to go into like T10 extension, and then your pelvis is all jammed up just to sit there. So one of the things I like to do is when the chair is like garbage, is just sit all the way towards the end of the chair, just so my butt's just on the edge. That way I can just kind of control how I want to sit. But I find it's almost even like societal, like everything's designed to be ergonomic, but really it's just not, conducive to good posture and movement.
Yeah. And people don't realize that. I mean, the question I would put out there is, why is good posture an absolute necessity for you to live the life that inspires you?
It's a great way to put it, for sure.
And I would encourage people to reflect on that. Because if you want to lose fat, you're going to need good posture so that you're not irritating your joints. Because you can't exercise if you've always got nagging injuries that are preventing you from being able to exercise with the kind of volume needed to get the results you want. If you want to be strong, your joints need to be able to be in the strongest position. If you want to look good, having that Mr. Burns look, being slouched forward from The Simpsons, has never been really a sexy look, right? Good posture is always in fashion. Bell bottoms may go in and out, and knicker pants and those zebra bodybuilder pants. I don't know. So many fashions go in and out. Good posture is always in fashion. It always looks good. And then for confidence, right? Like it even mentally affects you. When you assume good posture, it changes your brain. It puts you in more of that better version of you, right? The minute we go into defeatist posture, we start to go into defeatist thinking, where, it starts to just lower our energy. So I think the main thing for listeners to think about is, why is good posture an absolute necessity for you to live the life that inspires you? And know that it is possible, and it's much easier than you think. But mainstream thinking is very confused on this front. I think in the distant future, they're going to look back on this time as the age of great stupidity when it comes to this stuff. And it already is. Like, there's so much evidence that we have our priorities backwards when it comes to all this stuff. There's a lot of confusing, distorted truths out there. And we don't realize how, as you mentioned, like simple things like your environment and just optimizing your environment can have a big impact on all of this stuff. A bad work environment leads to bad posture, just because you're always going to be assuming dysfunctional positions and they get reinforced over time. And if you can commit to making good posture a non-negotiable in your life, then being in good posture will be the new normal, so that when you assume bad posture, it doesn't feel right. Right now, for many people, good posture doesn't feel right. It feels weird. And here, and a lot of things are like that. So, for example, if you put one hand on your chest and one hand on your stomach, okay, and then you take 10 breaths, just naturally, 10 big breaths, naturally, however you take it. And I would encourage the listeners, just do the same right now. 10 breaths, big breaths, naturally, the way you take it, okay? Now, and you watch the way your hands move. For many people, the top hand is moving. It's more chest breathing, which isn't necessarily optimal. And that tends to happen with bad posture, because then we're doing shrugs all day long. It's a little bit more stressful on the body, and it's not as good for circulation and spine health. So if you were to then try to do this and only move the bottom hand, so you're breathing in and out and only moving the bottom hand, and then just feel how normal and natural that is for you, and score it 1 to 10. Because that's what normal should be. If you're taking 28,000 breaths a day and you belly breathe, then you're creating that circulation for your organs of digestion. You're also creating more tension in the supportive abdominal muscles for your spine. But if that doesn't feel normal to you, then it means bad breathing patterns are the new normal for you. And that's an example that's very common for people, is that if they only move the bottom hand, sometimes it feels weird. For me, that feels normal. It feels weird to chest breathe, but I've done the work to be able to make that shift, and many other people have. So the key is make good posture the new normal, and then you'll have that keen awareness when you're doing things wrong, because it just won't feel right.
I wanted to give a huge shout out to David at Deskbound Therapy. I started working with David about 8 to 9 months ago. And when I first joined, I had a lot of back pain. I needed to work on my posture. And we took the first couple months to kind of fix up my posture. My back started feeling great. I didn't have any problems when I was lifting or anything like that. And once we got my body kind of ready to lift, got into the weights, and I started gaining size pretty quick, and I got very strong. And even everybody around me, my family, my friends, everybody noticed the gain in my size. And every time my goals would change a little bit, David would kind of work with me. He's very knowledgeable, and especially with nutrition. So that was one thing I didn't know a whole lot about. So with David kind of helping me through the whole process, I was able to kind of meet my goals and do everything I needed to do. And now my body feels great. And anytime I've had other issues, my shoulder hurt, my foot hurt, things like that, he would kind of change the plan up, worked with me throughout the whole process. And I'm very thankful, David, for the results I've gotten. So if you need to fix your body up, you want to get stronger, you want to get lean, go check out David at Deskbound Therapy.
That's a great way to look at it. Is it shouldn't be uncomfortable to sit with without having kyphosis. You should get to that point where your body assumes that position. It does take it takes lots of work to get to the point where you have a position where you're comfortable in. And that's something I don't know if you're aware, but I have an online course called 12 Weeks to Perfect Posture, where it's not just a bunch of stretches, but what I've done is I've made it so there's a self-assessment, so people can really understand where their limitations are. And then we go into the foundations phase, where it's all really about mobilizing those areas that need to be mobilized, as well as I made it so there's postural strengthening that happens on top of the mobility stuff to make sure people are sustaining their gains. And I've really intentionally spaced it out, so you really have to commit to the each phase, and throughout the 12 weeks, even 16 weeks, as long as it takes you. That way people by that time are able to make lifestyle changes, and they're also working on strength training and mobility and stuff like that. That's going to help them long term. And I'm curious, obviously you're the king of corrective exercises, if I can say that. And what are some ways that you incorporate mobility or exercise kind of therapy into whether it be warm up or mobility routines for Just say your client, just so they can continue to train pain free.
Okay. First of all, I have to address the comment of king of correctives. Thank you very much. But I would receive that compliment on behalf of all of those who have shaped me into being who I am today, who have supported me and inspired me. And really, any success I have is truly a reflection of the success of many other people, countless other people. So I'll accept that on behalf of all of them.
Absolutely, man.
But I feel for me, when we're there, there's the first phase. I think of it like this: when you're doing postural work, it's like healing medicine. Okay. And you need to fulfill your prescription to get the results. You need to get the dosage and the frequency correct. So what we do is we do some really in-depth postural assessments, right? So, if I'm to look at something like the knees, I'd be like, first of all, I got to know which of the 7 knee problems you may have that are going on posturally. And I know that when people are seeing other specialists, they're not looking for the 7. They're looking for maybe 1 or 2 of the 7. Most people don't even know what the 7 major postural dysfunctions in the knee are. But if I'm looking for those, then I'm going to come up with a plan specific to what they're presenting with. I'm going to be like, okay, it's genu recurvatum. Here's the stretches you need to do. Here's the exercises you need to do to balance your posture, right? So we want to be very precise on getting on target. And then once we get very precise with that, and if it's the shoulder, there's going to be a set list number of what the major shoulder postural deviations are. If it's the hip, same thing. And I'll just say, these are the postural deviations we're looking for. Here's how we look for them. And here's how we identify what's going on. Then once we're clear on what the client needs, then I just say, okay, here's like the healing medicine. Here's the correctives that we're going to be doing. And the correctives really, we call them correctives, but it's a corrective strategy, but it's almost like giving somebody that healing medicine, but they have to take it in the right dosage and frequency for lasting change. Typically it's twice a day. And for lasting true change in muscle tendon length, it needs to be reinforced for about 6 to 8 weeks. If it's less than 6 to 8 weeks, you may get results. You can get pain-free. You can feel good, but you might find that it'll come back the minute you go off your meds, so to speak. So for me, I'm applying those correctives twice a day for about a 6 to 8 week interval. And we're mixing it in a number of ways. It could be your daily movements. It could be your warm-ups before you exercise. It could be your cool downs. Sometimes people will mix it in the rest intervals of your traditional workout program, and to be realistic, people will sometimes not do the twice a day, but in aiming to do it twice a day, people get a sufficient dosage typically. But I find a lot of times it comes down to managing expectations with clients, because clients have never really been educated on how much postural work is actually needed for a lasting change. They may be given a whole bunch of stuff, but they're not having defined for them exactly what the dosage and frequency needs to be biologically in the body in order to create the outcome they want. So that's it for me. It's like, just get very precise on exactly what's going on, get the prescription right, then make sure they fulfill that prescription and just fit it into their lifestyle in creative ways.
Yeah, and I think that the frequency is such a great approach, because a lot of people think, if you sit 8 hours a day, that 30 seconds of stretching is going to cut it for you, and you're all of a sudden gonna be in the right position. But you really need to start moving the body more than once a day. Twice a day is good, but really just trying to move each hour. We shouldn't be, if we're going to be stuck in that position, our tissues are going to creep forward, and it's going to be really hard, versus if, you make, an effort for 2 or 3 minutes, each hour or even more, then it's going to really pay dividends down the road. And the way I like to, encourage people to really get in the routine, because, we're creatures of habit, is, I recommend people, something I do is just get some movement, get some mobility, get some light strengthening in the morning, just to kind of wake the joints up. Like I say, one of the worst things you can do is, just wake up and just go right back to sitting, right? Try to, go for an early walk in the morning, try to do some stretching, try to do something that's going to be conducive to help you, make more, comfortable while you're at work, but also, contribute to making more gains in the gym.
David, I love that. I mean, you're making a great point, which is that, what they're doing is if you can get it in every hour and you can commit to it, then you're putting yourself into a high functioning state. You're putting yourself into a very resourceful state, because with good posture comes good thinking. With good posture comes good creativity. The blood and oxygen is going to get to your brain better. You're going to feel better. You're going to be more creative. With good posture, you relate to other people better. When people are in aches and pains, they become cranky and moody generally. And, who can blame them? It's not a fun place to be. But it's like, if you can just do a few things here and there and mix it into your day in order to be in that very resourceful, high functioning state, it's just going to optimize whatever it is you're doing. Why allow a low standard for your life? I mean, I know that the most successful people I know, all of them prioritize this stuff. Every single one of them. They don't care how much they can bench or squat or deadlift necessarily. Those things might matter in a different context, but for people who are just like executives that are just have to be at their best because a lot of people are depending on them, even just people who want to be the best they can for their family, like this is a necessary piece of the puzzle for anybody who really wants to achieve success in what matters for them in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want, to be fit and to be healthy, that you can't just think of, that 1 hour in the gym, but there's so much other stuff you can do throughout the day. And, I really feel like it'd be nice if there was, more of a cultural shift in, offices, people are home now and it's great. But, I feel like when I used to work as in software and I did websites, like when I would bring in my standing desk or when I would do stretches and stuff, like I would get dirty looks, and it just like some people just like think something's wrong with moving the body and taking care of themselves. They're like, hey, look at the new guy on his first day stretching. And it's just like, I found that a weird environment where we should encourage people to to take care of their health and to make their bodies feel good. I remember one time I was working and I was slouched over with kyphosis, and I think I got like a strain in one of my trap muscles, and I decided to go to see the chiropractor like 7 a.m. before work. And then when they asked me why they're late, I was like, well, I was in pain, I wasn't going to be productive working. They're like, oh, that's not an excuse, and eventually quit that job. But it just like, it's crazy how some people don't prioritize posture and taking care of their bodies, where it has so many benefits. Like I agree with the part of the mood, because like my shoulder was bugging me last week, and that's really all you can think about. We tend to fixate on these things. And one thing that really resonated with me that you said at the beginning of the episode was how you take a hands-off approach of exercise and stretching versus you don't rely on a lot of those passive interventions. And that really is something that I really applaud you for, because that's something I personally when I start practicing like as a physiotherapist, I tell all my classmates this: I'm going to primarily do exercise prescription and assessment, because that's what I feel most passionate about. And the hands-on stuff is great, and I'm sure I'll do it a little bit for my assessments. I feel like exercise is the best medicine.
Yeah, I love it. Lots of great gems of wisdom you just shared there. And I think my approach with active and passive solutions is this: I give people hands-off solutions. Now, I have nothing but love and respect for the hands-on solutions. And I think they're always a beneficial complement to whatever I'm giving somebody. And I let them know that. But with exercise therapy, my thoughts are that, the biggest barrier to success is inconvenience. And so I want the approach, the solution, to be as convenient as possible, which means that the client should be able to do everything they can on their own. And that way I know that they can get the frequency in, because otherwise there's just not enough. Life is too busy for somebody to come back to me and have me put them back together with my hands with the amount of frequency needed to actually get some momentum and long-term results. I used to be a hands-on person, and it has tremendous benefit, but I feel like the way that I do things, it's kind of like your base is the hands-off active correctives, and then you can layer in all this extra stuff where you have people work on your body to speed things along. And I think that, one of the things you mentioned about your shoulder that I wanted to speak to is that, when people are in pain, it's all consuming. When you're in pain, it's really hard to think about everything going on in your life when you have a throbbing ache in your shoulder or anything like that. And I think for those people out there, other trainers who are considering specializing in this type of work, it's very, very profound to do this kind of stuff, because when you can take people out of pain, they can live their life again, because it is so all consuming. It takes people off of being a good mother or being a good father and being a good employee or being a good boss or just being a good teammate. When people are in pain, it compromises their ability to perform at all those things because they get consumed by it. And, if you're just an exercise enthusiast, it's always a good idea to plan for this in advance. Don't wait for it to happen and then respond. This should be part of your lifestyle if you really want to live with good form. And I know you had also talked about how people will kind of, ridicule you if you're doing things at the office or if you're stretching at your computer, and people will do that. And I think one of the things is it's human nature. It's human nature that when people don't understand something, they're threatened by it, and they might feel guilty about their own lack of initiative to doing things for their body. So instead of feeling like their self-worth is even lower now because they don't do this stuff, instead, the story they will try to create is that you're a weirdo, right? Because that's easier for their pride to swallow than the fact that, hey, I can take care of my body too, and it's easy. Look at this guy. So people will run up against that. And so when you have sort of a postural plan and you're going to be carrying things out in a way in which people are going to see you, the best thing you can just do is say, hey, look, I'm just a bit funny, but I've got these crazy weird exercises I do at my desk a couple times a day, but I'm just like funny like that. And then people are cool with it because now you've disarmed their ego from feeling threatened, because you've acknowledged in advance that you're, and you know what they'll do? They'll laugh and wave to you. You're like, hey, Dave, what's going on? Oh yeah, doing those silly exercises. You're like, yeah, I'm nuts. Like, isn't this weird? Like my coach makes me do all these crazy things. He's a crazy coach, right? And then they're cool with it and they embrace it. But the key is with this, some people might be like, well, they're to blame because they're the ones who judge me. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? If they're judging you, they actually deserve more of your compassion, not less, because they're confused. I mean, that's not a virtuous path to judge other people. It's like the same way that we might be compassionate towards someone who's sick and ill. We should be compassionate towards people who choose kind of socially dysfunctional patterns, right? And have compassion for them. So a good way to ease in is just to find common ground and harmony with them and lead by example, and just not make them feel threatened if you can. Just kind of call it out in advance. Be like, hey, I'm Dave. I work at this cubicle here. Just giving everybody a heads up. I do weird exercises twice a day. So if I'm doing them, feel free to just give me a wave and a shout out. That's just my weird thing I do, right? And then they don't feel judged, because people are these days, I think it's unfortunate, but I think these days self-worth is a struggle for a lot of people, and it's kind of overwhelming. And so people can be they can feel threatened very easy. They can get triggered and reactionary, and that might come out as irrational criticism or ridicule is the way it might manifest. And they don't understand their pain on many levels. They're just living reactively on whims and impulses, and they don't understand what's going on beneath the surface. So I think the best thing to do is just try to love them the best you can. Those people that love the haters, that's all I'm saying. Just love the haters. Just make it seem more about you than them. And then that removes any of the awkwardness of the office.
Yeah, man, I wish I thought of it that way. Back in the day, that would have been super helpful advice. But it's true, just kind of make it, humorous, and get along with people, and that'll help you. If that's what's holding you back from doing your exercises, and that's some really actionable advice there for sure. I'm curious, what is your training like? Is it like how do you find that fine line between blending, for example, your strength training with, doing all the correctives and the mobility? Because I definitely agree with you, just because you're not in pain doesn't mean you can, neglect the stuff that you need to do to prevent the injury. So I'm curious, how you find that balance.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I will do more of a strength oriented workout, but I will do a lot of this kind of posture stuff for the warm up to stick my body into the positions from which I move best. So for me, it comes into a lot of like movement prep. And then, occasionally I'll put in accessory movements that might help posture. And that's primarily it. And I don't have any aches and pains, but I'm at the point where it's just kind of like maintenance. Like I just don't get aches and pains ever. And I can push my body hard and just nothing comes up. But I've also been very strategic in my approach. So if I were to even feel something starting to creep on, I would respond right away in my next workout with things that I know alleviate whatever problem I've recognized is starting to creep in. So for me, it's just kind of like uninhibited workouts, but I just have warm-ups that tend to just optimize posture. And I just mix it in that way. I think posture, your relationship with posture will change. It's very seasonal. There'll be a season when it tends to dominate what you do. And that's usually when you're right in the threshold of aches and pains. And then there's a season where it just plays a less role. Like it's just a sideshow performance to everything you do. And for me personally, it's just been a sideshow for many years because I just haven't had the need for it, but I still mix it in. It's like taking your vitamins. Like, you want to at least make sure you take your vitamins on a regular basis, or eat healthy on a regular basis, even though there's no problem. Right.
That's awesome. That's an awesome way to, to get the mobility work and the posture work in before is definitely a great way, and there's some other strategies I've done when I'm short for time is, say I was, doing bench, I'm doing lower body hip mobility and ankle mobility between sets, if I have the energy. So I like to do like non-competing stuff. So for example, like sometimes when I'm benching, I would do, some shoulder extension, just kind of work just to kind of, work on the, some of the little things that are, aren't so fun, but a way instead of, just sitting on the bench press, slouching on your phone in between sets, I find, that can be pretty effective for people, like, just trying to kind of almost make it a superset, but it's more just focused on, making sure you don't get too tight during the workout and you still have good range. But there's so many ways, and it's about, finding what your body responds best with, for sure. I do have one last question, by the way, for you today is,
Sure.
What is your stance on, end range joint training and building end range strength? I know that's, pretty common these days with FRC and, becoming popular. I'm not sure, specifically your stance is. I'm sure you'd agree that, it's good to, have strength in those range of motions, but I'm curious, what your stance is on, strengthening end range and mobilizing end range of motion.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to the goal and priority, right? Is it relevant to the goal and priority? That's where I go straight to it. Like it may be a necessity, it may not be. I just take a look at what's most important to the client right now, right? And I know there's a lot of approaches out there. And what I would say is this, when it comes to, because people ask me to comment on a lot of different approaches, I don't argue with what works. Right. So if something's working, I say, great. In the same way, I would say this, you talked about the intervention you'll do on the bench press, which is great. Here's what I really like about that. When you shared that, you're sharing your truth. Your truth has been that this helps and your truth is relevant. Right. Mm-hmm. And then you share your truth with this 12-week posture course, which is great. That's your truth. Nobody can argue with your truth. Mm-hmm. That's what's worked for you from your journey. I love it. I could learn from that. Everybody could learn from that, right? Like whatever your truth is and it's working, please share it. Whoever you are, please share it with the rest of us. We can all benefit from sharing what works, right? So when we get into things like concepts like end range of motion stability and stuff like that, there's a lot of reasons why that makes sense because, in end range of motion, you can be at a position of increased vulnerability. So if you're trying to just bulletproof the system, that's a good idea, right? yeah, I typically call it other things when I'm doing it, and I have a different approach to doing it, but people will recognize there's many different ways to achieve the same beneficial result posturally and functionally. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what matters most is whether or not it works, because I'm not going to argue with anything that works. In fact, I'm not really going to argue, period, because even if it doesn't work, I'd be like, that's a successful experiment. We know that this is not the right solution in this scenario. So now let's try something else. So I think the one thing I would encourage people is, when you're trying to come to the truth on anything out there, any other system, anything at all, the best way to do it, there's considered three different categories for truth. Third-rate truth is just to research about it. What am I reading? What am I finding in books and stuff like that? That's third-rate truth. It's not great. Like, you can read all you want, but you can still be misled or confused. Second-rate truth is to know directly from somebody who knows for sure. So if you were to say to me, like, hey, you've tried this method and you've tried this method, what works better? And I could say, in my experience, here's how I tried them out and here's the results I got. Then that's second-rate truth. It's pretty good. Like, you're hearing from somebody who knows. And then first-rate truth is to see for yourself, test it out and realize. Because until you test it out, there's always going to be an undercurrent of doubt. So I would say that when it comes to any question like this, I would encourage you, to whatever degree you can, truth through experience, test and realize. If it's not practical to do that, a good starting point is to hear from somebody who knows. And if you're not able to do that, do your research and stuff, but have that standard and priority for your life. And that'll put you in the express lane to mastery.
Man, you shared so much knowledge on this podcast today, and it's such a great way to, bring back season 2. Is, such, really actionable advice here. There's definitely, a lot I learned today, and a lot, I hope the listeners, will add to their, their repertoire of knowledge. And I really like how, you got the weekly newsletter. I'm always learning something. You got, free webinars. You have, the squat master class. And, I've done a few of the online ones, but I'm really looking forward to, when they're available again in Toronto, is to come and, working with you, in person would be definitely a great experience. So can you just let the listeners know, how they, you mentioned at the beginning, but, how they can connect with you on social media again?
Absolutely. So Exercise Therapy Association on Instagram, Exercise Therapy Group on Facebook, Exercise Therapy page on Facebook. Feel free to find me personally on, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, for my personal pages. Let's be friends for life. Like, if you're here at the end of the interview, then I know you are a truth seeker, that unlike everybody who says they want to be better, you're actually willing to put in the time and effort, and that makes you special. And I'll tell you that I'll be here to support you, and just think of me like a friend you haven't met yet. I'm here to share and help each other in our journey. So just consider me as a friend you haven't met yet. And I also just want to say that I want to give a shout out to you, David, for running this podcast, because this is your gift of love and wisdom to the world. This is your contribution. You're putting this together, you're putting it out there in the world, and you're giving value to people. You're helping give them power and clarity over areas that are confusing in life. You're helping them to live their best life. And so, listeners, I would encourage you, just give him a quick note to let him know how much it means to you that he's just taken this upon himself to be able to give his time and give of his life, to be able to provide this wonderful gift to the rest of us, so we can always just tune into this stuff and we can all learn and grow together.
Well, yeah, I definitely appreciate the praise as well, man. It was great that I was able to, have you on the podcast, because you're, the first person I thought of, like, who would be a great guest for season 2 after taking, a month or 2 off the podcast. And it was a pleasure chatting. We'll definitely have to, to do this again, because I feel like we could have talked for, 3 hours. There's so much, to chat about. So looking forward to, connecting with you again sometime soon.
Absolutely, buddy. It's been an awesome pleasure chatting with you. You're a totally awesome dude. I look forward to meeting you in person one day. Love to have you out at one of the courses, checking it out, and just being a friend for you in your journey.
Yeah, man.